25 celebrities murdered by the Mafia. Hollywood's hidden kill list, full version. Hollywood taught us to believe fame is protection, that talent, money, and applause build invisible armor. But what if the brightest stars were never in control at all? Behind the red carpets and neon lights, power moved quietly, deciding who rose, who fell, and who vanished. These are not movie plots. These are real lives shaped by fear, silence, and influence hidden in plain sight. Some survive by staying quiet, others pay the ultimate price. As you watch, ask yourself, were these people victims, participants, or expendable pieces in a much larger game? Subscribe and comment below. This is Black Excellence Legends, where history speaks back. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, the gangster who turned Hollywood into a crime scene. When Hollywood sold the world a fantasy of elegance and escape, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel was already writing a darker script behind the scenes. Born in 1906 in Brooklyn to immigrant parents, Siegel rose from street crime to become one of the most influential figures linking organized crime to America's entertainment capital. Unlike traditional mobsters who thrived in anonymity, Siegel understood something revolutionary for his time. Image was power. By the early 1930s, Siegel had co-founded Murder, Inc., the enforcement arm of the National Crime Syndicate, responsible for dozens of confirmed contract killings. Yet violence was never his public face. When he moved west to California, he reinvented himself as a socialite, tailored suits, polished manners, and open access to Hollywood's elite. Studio executives, producers, and movie stars welcomed him into private parties, often unaware or willfully ignorant of who he truly was. Siegel's most ambitious gamble was Las Vegas. Backed by mob money, he spearheaded the construction of the Flamingo Hotel, the first luxury casino designed to attract celebrities rather than gamblers alone. Construction costs exploded from an estimated $1.5 million to over $6 million, triggering suspicion among East Coast crime bosses who believed Siegel was skimming profits. In organized crime, financial doubt is more dangerous than betrayal. On June 20th, 1947, Siegel was shot multiple times through a window while sitting in the Beverly Hills home of his girlfriend, Virginia Hill. He was 41 years old. The murder was precise, unsolved, and widely understood as a sanctioned execution. No arrests followed. Siegel's death marked a turning point. Hollywood learned that glamour offered no immunity, and Las Vegas inherited his blueprint. Today, the Strip still operates on foundations he helped pour, not with bullets, but with money, spectacle, and calculated risk. Bugsy Siegel didn't just die violently, he permanently changed how crime and celebrity intersected in America. Virginia Hill. Virginia Hill was never meant to be visible, yet she became unforgettable. Born in 1916 in Alabama, she rose from poverty into one of the most dangerous positions a person could hold in mid-20th century America. A trusted courier for organized crime at the height of its power. Hill did not carry guns or issue threats. Her value lay in discretion. She moved cash, messages, and sensitive information between crime families, casinos, and West Coast business interests, including those intertwined with Hollywood. By the 1940s, Hill had become romantically involved with Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, placing her at the center of the Las Vegas casino boom. She handled large sums of money tied to the Flamingo Hotel project and was deeply embedded in the financial arteries of the mob's Western expansion. Her frequent presence at Hollywood gatherings blurred the line between celebrity culture and criminal enterprise, making her both glamorous and exposed. When Siegel was assassinated in 1947 inside Hill's Beverly Hills home, she was conspicuously absent. Authorities questioned her, but never charged her. From that moment on, Hill lived under permanent suspicion from law enforcement and from the mob itself. She relocated across Europe, maintaining an affluent lifestyle while reportedly growing increasingly anxious and isolated. In 1966, Hill was found dead in Salzburg, Austria. The official ruling was suicide by overdose. However, no note was found, and those close to her disputed the conclusion. By then, Hill's finances had collapsed, and her connections had vanished. She was 49 years old. Virginia Hill's story remains haunting because it exposes a truth Hollywood preferred to ignore. The most powerful figures were often not the loudest. She survived violence, but not knowledge. In a world built on silence, Hill's greatest liability was memory, and that made her expendable. Johnny Stompanato. Johnny Stompanato lived as though Hollywood were a costume he could wear. Born in 1925, he moved from amateur boxing into the orbit of Los Angeles crime boss Mickey Cohen, serving as an enforcer during a volatile post-war period. Stompanato cultivated a polished appearance, expensive cars, tailored suits, and public confidence, masking a reputation for intimidation and volatility. His relationship with actress Lana Turner placed him directly in the public eye. On the surface, the pairing fascinated gossip columnists. Privately, it unraveled into something far darker. Multiple accounts later described Stompanato as possessive and violent, exerting control over Turner's movements and isolating her from colleagues. Hollywood's studio system, built on image preservation, remained largely silent. On April 4, 1958, an argument erupted inside Turner's Beverly Hills home. During the confrontation, Turner's teenage daughter, Cheryl Crane, stabbed Stompanato once in the abdomen. He died shortly afterward. He was 32 years old. The coroner ruled the killing justifiable homicide, citing defense of another person. Crane was never charged. Publicly, the case appeared resolved. Privately, questions lingered. Some investigators and journalists speculated whether Stompanato had fallen out of favor with organized crime, making his death convenient rather than tragic. No evidence ever substantiated those claims. What remains undisputed is the impact. The incident permanently altered Lana Turner's career and exposed the danger of unchecked criminal proximity to celebrity life. Stompanato did not die in a gang war or a dark alley. He died inside a movie star's home, under the brightest spotlight imaginable, proof that when violence enters glamour, it does not ask permission. Lana Turner. Lana Turner was one of Hollywood's most luminous creations, a star built on glamour, beauty, and box office certainty. Discovered as a teenager in the late 1930s, she quickly became a symbol of MGM's golden age, starring in dozens of films and embodying the studio system's promise that fame could transform an ordinary life into something extraordinary. Yet behind the carefully managed image was a woman navigating an industry that offered protection only as long as silence was maintained. By the 1950s, Turner's private life had become increasingly turbulent. Her relationship with Johnny Stompanato, a man connected to Los Angeles organized crime, marked a turning point. What began as a public romance soon devolved into a pattern of control and fear. Testimony later revealed episodes of intimidation and emotional abuse, conducted far from cameras and premieres. The studio system, more concerned with optics than safety, did little to intervene. The crisis reached its breaking point on April 4, 1958. During a violent argument inside Turner's Beverly Hills home, her teenage daughter, Cheryl Crane, stabbed Stompanato, killing him. Authorities ruled the act justifiable homicide. Legally, the case ended there. Professionally and emotionally, it never did. Turner was 74 when she died in 1995, but the shadow of that night followed her for decades. Although she continued acting, her career never fully recovered its former momentum. Public sympathy was mixed with suspicion, and Hollywood quietly distanced itself. Turner's story illustrates a central truth of the era. Fame offered visibility, not safety. She survived, but survival came at the cost of trust, privacy, and the illusion that stardom could shield anyone from the consequences of dangerous proximity. Sal Mineo. Sal Mineo represented a different kind of Hollywood promise. Emerging in the 1950s, he stood out not for polished perfection, but for emotional intensity. His performance in Rebel Without a Cause, opposite James Dean, captured the restless vulnerability of post-war youth and earned him an Academy Award nomination before he turned 20. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Mineo refused to remain static, pushing toward more complex, riskier roles as he matured. That independence, however, placed him at odds with an industry uncomfortable with ambiguity. As Hollywood changed, Mineo found himself working increasingly in theater and smaller productions, navigating a social world far removed from studio protection. Friends later recalled that he was outspoken, unafraid to challenge intimidation, and increasingly aware of the dangers surrounding nightlife and entertainment circles in Los Angeles during the 1970s. On February 12, 1976, Mineo was stabbed outside his West Hollywood apartment after returning from rehearsal. He was 37 years old. Police described the killing as a random robbery, yet no valuables were taken. The case remains unresolved, leaving behind unanswered questions that fueled speculation, but never produced evidence of a targeted hit. Mineo's death marked a quiet but profound rupture. It symbolized the end of Hollywood's post-war innocence and underscored how vulnerable even recognized talent could be once removed from institutional protection. He was not erased by scandal or decline, but by sudden violence that offered no explanation. In remembering Sal Mineo, the tragedy lies not only in how he died, but in how much more he might have reshaped cinema had his story not ended in darkness. Sam Giancana. Sam Giancana was never a movie star, yet few figures influence Hollywood's underworld more directly. Born in 1908, Giancana rose to become the undisputed boss of the Chicago outfit during the 1950s and 1960s, a period when organized crime quietly financed casinos, controlled labor unions, and extended its reach into entertainment. His authority was not built on charisma alone, but on fear, loyalty, and strategic alliances that stretched from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. Giancana understood the value of celebrities. Hollywood stars filled mob-owned casinos, legitimized dirty money, and distracted the public from who truly held control. Through figures like Frank Sinatra, Giancana's presence seeped into elite social circles where politics, fame, and crime intersected. Federal investigations later confirmed his involvement in large-scale gambling operations and labor racketeering, and declassified documents revealed contacts between Giancana and U.S. intelligence agencies during Cold War covert operations. By the early 1970s, the climate changed. Law enforcement pressure intensified, and Giancana was subpoenaed to testify before congressional committees investigating organized crime and intelligence abuses. For a man who survived by silence, testimony was dangerous. On June 19, 1975, Giancana was found shot 7 times in the basement kitchen of his Chicago home. He was 67 years old. No forced entry was found. The murder was never solved. Giancana's death sent a clear message. Power offered no protection once trust was broken. For Hollywood, his execution quietly confirmed what insiders already suspected, that the boundary between entertainment and organized crime was not symbolic, but structural. His influence did not end with his life. It dissolved into systems that continued operating long after his name disappeared from headlines. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe remains one of the most documented and misunderstood figures in cultural history. Born in 1926, she rose from instability and obscurity to become the defining image of Hollywood glamour. By the late 1950s, Monroe was not merely an actress, but a global symbol. Commercially powerful, intensely scrutinized, and emotionally isolated within an industry that commodified her vulnerability. Her associations with powerful men, including politicians and entertainment figures, have been extensively examined. Among them were rumored social encounters with individuals connected to organized crime, including Sam Giancana. Crucially, no credible evidence has ever proven criminal involvement or mob control over Monroe's life. What is documented is her proximity to power and the pressure that came with it. Constant surveillance, contractual exploitation, and invasive media attention. On August 4, 1962, Monroe died at age 36 from an overdose of barbiturates. The official ruling was probable suicide, later reaffirmed by multiple investigations. While conspiracy theories persist, no verified findings support claims of assassination. Repeating such allegations without evidence distorts history rather than revealing it. Monroe's significance in this narrative lies not in how she died, but in how exposed she was. Fame placed her near powerful forces without granting her agency or security. She was neither protected nor insulated by her status. In a system where influence circulated quietly behind closed doors, Monroe stood in full view, absorbing pressure from every direction. Her legacy endures because it reflects a deeper truth. Celebrity can amplify vulnerability as easily as it amplifies success. Marilyn Monroe was not silenced by organized crime, but she existed within a world shaped by power structures that rarely favored transparency or mercy. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was not merely a performer. He was an institution. Born in 1915, Sinatra rose from a working-class Italian-American background to become one of the most influential entertainers of the 20th century. His voice defined an era, his screen presence carried authority, and his cultural reach extended far beyond music or film. Yet Sinatra's career unfolded during a period when Las Vegas, recording contracts, and major venues were inseparable from organized crime influence. During the post-war decades, Sinatra was closely associated with Las Vegas casinos that were later proven to be mob-financed. Performances at these venues were lucrative, consistent, and highly visible. Sinatra did not run criminal operations, nor was he ever charged with involvement in organized crime. However, his friendships with figures such as Sam Giancana placed him uncomfortably close to power structures that operated outside the law. FBI files confirmed long-term surveillance of Sinatra due to these associations, not due to criminal acts of his own. What distinguished Sinatra was awareness. He understood the boundaries he was walking. Unlike others who drifted blindly into dangerous territory, Sinatra navigated relationships carefully, maintaining plausible distance while benefiting from access and protection in an industry where refusal could stall a career. His role in the Rat Pack further cemented his image as untouchable. Yet that confidence existed alongside constant scrutiny. Sinatra lived to 82, 1998, outlasting nearly every criminal figure connected to his orbit. His survival was not accidental. It reflected discipline, adaptability, and an instinct for self-preservation. Sinatra's story demonstrates that in Hollywood's most compromised era, endurance often depended less on innocence and more on knowing when to speak, when to perform, and when to walk away. Dino Bravo. Dino Bravo represented a different kind of celebrity, one forged in physical spectacle rather than film or song. Born in 1948 in Italy and raised in Canada, Bravo became a national icon through professional wrestling, celebrated for his imposing strength and larger-than-life persona. At the height of his popularity in the 1980s, he was widely recognized across North America, enjoying the rewards and visibility that came with mass entertainment success. When his wrestling career slowed, Bravo faced a problem common to performers whose fame peaks early: maintaining income without the spotlight. In Montreal, he became involved in the illegal cigarette smuggling trade, a racket dominated by organized crime. Court records later confirmed his participation in large-scale trafficking operations, including a 1992 conviction related to contraband distribution. This was not rumor, it was documented fact. On March 11, 1993, Bravo was shot 17 times inside his home. He was 44 years old. Nothing was stolen. The killing bore the hallmarks of a professional execution. No one was ever convicted. Bravo's death shocked the public because it shattered the illusion that celebrity outside Hollywood was safer. His case illustrated how quickly fame could become irrelevant once criminal interests were involved. Unlike performers protected by studios or unions, Bravo operated without institutional insulation. When trust collapsed, there was no exit strategy. Dino Bravo's legacy is not defined by his final moments, but by the warning they represent. Visibility can open doors, but it does not close them behind you. In the world he entered, applause faded faster than consequences. Anthony "Tony the Ant" Spilatro. Anthony Spilatro was never meant to be famous, yet his reputation became inseparable from Las Vegas history. Born in 1938, Spilatro rose within the Chicago outfit as an enforcer trusted to handle problems others could not. His assignment to Las Vegas during the 1970s was strategic. The city had become a cash engine for organized crime, and protecting that flow required someone feared more than questioned. Spilatro oversaw loan sharking, extortion, and enforcement operations while keeping casino skimming secure. He led a crew later known as the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang, responsible for a series of high-profile burglaries. Federal records confirm his involvement in racketeering and repeated indictments, though convictions were difficult to secure. His growing visibility, volatile temperament, and appetite for attention began to worry those above him. Organized crime depends on discretion, and Spilatro increasingly disrupted that balance. Hollywood took notice. Writers and filmmakers studied his behavior, fascinated by the raw efficiency of his methods. Yet admiration was irrelevant to the organization he served. By the mid-1980s, Spilatro was considered a liability. On June 14, 1986, he and his brother were lured to a meeting near Chicago. Both were beaten to death and buried in an Indiana cornfield. Spilatro was 48 years old. His execution marked the end of an era in Las Vegas. The mob retreated from overt control, and federal oversight expanded rapidly afterward. Spilatro's life illustrates a hard truth. In systems built on order through fear, excess violence becomes a weakness. His name survived in cinema, but his real legacy was a warning. Enforcement without restraint eventually targets itself. Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa commanded influence without celebrity, yet his reach shaped industries tied directly to entertainment and finance. Born in 1913, Hoffa transformed the Teamsters Union into one of the most powerful labor organizations in the United States. Under his leadership, union pension funds grew into multi-billion-dollar reserves. Those funds became essential financing sources for construction projects, Las Vegas casinos, and indirectly, film-related enterprises. Hoffa's alliances with organized crime were pragmatic rather than ideological. Mob-backed projects relied on Teamsters cooperation, and Hoffa relied on mob support to maintain control. For years, the arrangement worked. That balance collapsed after Hoffa's conviction for fraud and jury tampering in 1967. Although his sentence was later commuted, his attempt to reclaim union leadership disrupted interests that had moved on without him. By 1975, Hoffa was isolated and under surveillance. Federal investigations suggested he was prepared to speak openly about past dealings. On July 30, 1975, he disappeared after leaving his home for a meeting outside Detroit. He was 62 years old. His car was found. His body never was. No confirmed remains have been recovered despite decades of investigation. The absence itself became symbolic. Hoffa's disappearance demonstrated the most efficient form of erasure, one without evidence, trials, or closure. For Hollywood, his case reinforced a chilling lesson. Influence does not guarantee permanence. Power that relies on silence can vanish completely, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a cautionary legacy that still echoes across labor, politics, and entertainment. Carmine Galante. Carmine Galante ruled through intimidation, not consensus. Born in 1910, he rose to power within the Bonanno crime family by rejecting compromise and enforcing obedience with brutality. By the late 1970s, Galante had positioned himself as the dominant figure in a lucrative heroin distribution network, cutting out rival families and centralizing profits. This unilateral control violated the Mafia's most important rule: no one man claims everything. Galante did not hide. He dined publicly, posed for photographs, and cultivated an image of untouchable authority. His signature cigar became a calling card, an unmistakable symbol of confidence and defiance. That visibility fascinated journalists and filmmakers alike, reinforcing the cinematic myth of the gangster who ruled openly. In reality, it accelerated his downfall. Other crime families viewed Galante's behavior as reckless, drawing unnecessary attention to operations that depended on secrecy. On July 12, 1979, Galante was eating lunch at an Italian restaurant in Brooklyn when masked gunmen opened fire. He was struck multiple times and died at the scene, his cigar still clenched between his teeth. He was 69 years old. The photograph of his body circulated widely, becoming one of the most enduring images in organized crime history. Galante's murder was not impulsive. It was sanctioned, strategic, and final. His death restored balance among rival factions and sent a message that arrogance carried consequences. For Hollywood, the image endured as shorthand for overconfidence, the moment when myth collapses under reality. Galante's story illustrates that terror can secure loyalty briefly, but isolation guarantees vulnerability. He believed fear would protect him. It ensured he stood alone when protection disappeared. Jack "Legs" Diamond. Jack "Legs" Diamond built his reputation on defying death. Born in 1897, he emerged during Prohibition as a flamboyant bootlegger whose survival through repeated assassination attempts made him a media obsession. Shot multiple times in separate incidents, Diamond seemed to embody the myth that charisma and luck could overcome consequence. Newspapers followed his exploits closely, transforming him into a public spectacle rather than a discreet operator. Diamond embraced the attention. He dressed impeccably, courted reporters, and cultivated an image closer to a performer than a criminal. His operations spanned New York and the Northeast, involving liquor distribution and extortion. Yet his desire for recognition alienated both rivals and allies. Organized crime tolerated many flaws, but publicity was not one of them. On December 18, 1931, hours after being acquitted in court, Diamond returned to his Albany residence. That night, gunmen entered his room and shot him 3 times in the head while he slept. He was 34 years old. The murder was efficient and unclaimed, widely understood as a corrective act by those tired of his exposure. Diamond's death ended the illusion that resilience equaled immunity. He survived ambushes, hospital beds, and courtroom drama, only to be eliminated when vigilance faded. Hollywood later borrowed his archetype repeatedly, the charming outlaw undone by ego. Yet the real lesson was simpler. Survival without discipline breeds complacency, and in a world governed by silence, attention is not armor. Jack Diamond lived loudly. He died quietly. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most versatile performers America ever produced. Born in 1925, he mastered singing, dancing, acting, and comedy with a precision that seemed effortless. By the 1950s and 1960s, he stood at the center of American entertainment, selling out venues, appearing in major films, and performing alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin as part of the Rat Pack. On stage, Davis radiated freedom. Offstage, his choices were far more constrained. Las Vegas, where Davis earned enormous income and visibility, was deeply influenced by organized crime during his peak years. Casino ownership, booking contracts, and debt structures were tightly controlled. For Black performers in particular, access to these stages depended on approval from forces far beyond talent alone. Davis was acutely aware of this reality. He navigated it carefully, rarely challenging those who controlled venues and finances. One of the most documented pressures in his life involved his interracial relationship with actress Kim Novak in 1957. At the time, such relationships threatened both studio interests and criminal power structures tied to those studios. According to multiple historical accounts, Davis was warned that the relationship must end immediately. He complied, entering a brief marriage that satisfied external demands but left lasting emotional damage. Despite fame and fortune, Davis often spoke of never truly owning his success. He continued performing relentlessly, even as financial obligations and expectations followed him. He died in 1990 at age 64. Davis was not destroyed by violence, but by a system that extracted loyalty without offering safety. His story reveals a quieter form of control. The mob did not need to silence Sammy Davis Jr. They only needed to decide where he could stand, when he could speak, and how far his brilliance was allowed to travel. Frank "Lefty" Rosenthal. Frank Rosenthal did not look like a criminal, and that was precisely his advantage. Born in 1929, Rosenthal built his reputation as a gambling expert whose understanding of odds and risk made him indispensable to the Chicago outfit. In the 1960s and 1970s, he was sent to Las Vegas to oversee casino operations that generated millions in skim profits. His authority was operational, not symbolic. Rosenthal managed major casinos, including the Stardust, with strict discipline. Employees feared mistakes. Numbers were tracked obsessively. While he avoided public association with organized crime, law enforcement records later confirmed that his position was impossible without mob backing. His control extended into entertainment bookings, surveillance systems, and internal security. Unlike many figures before him, Rosenthal craved visibility. He hosted a local television show, appeared publicly, and cultivated a reputation as a visionary casino executive. That exposure alarmed his backers. In organized crime, attention invites consequences. On October 4, 1982, Rosenthal entered his car outside a Las Vegas restaurant. A bomb detonated beneath the driver's seat. Against all probability, he survived due to a steel reinforcement plate installed in the vehicle. He was 53 years old at the time. The attempt was widely interpreted as a warning rather than a mistake. Afterward, Rosenthal left Las Vegas permanently. He never testified publicly against organized crime and lived quietly until his death in 2008 at age 79. His survival made him an anomaly. Most men marked for removal do not escape twice. Rosenthal's legacy endures not because of violence, but because he proved something rare. Intelligence and caution could outlast brute force. He didn't win the game. He simply knew when to leave it. Mickey Cohen. Mickey Cohen understood something few criminals of his era dared to exploit. Publicity could be a weapon. Born in 1913, Cohen began as a street fighter and small-time boxer before entering organized crime under the mentorship of Benjamin "Bugsy" Siegel. When Siegel was killed in 1947, Cohen inherited not only territory, but visibility. Los Angeles became his stage, and he performed without restraint. Unlike traditional mob bosses who avoided attention, Cohen courted it. He gave interviews, posed for photographers, and openly mocked law enforcement. Nightclubs under his influence attracted movie stars, musicians, and journalists, blurring the boundary between crime and celebrity. His name appeared in gossip columns as often as crime reports. Hollywood did not merely tolerate him, it was fascinated. Behind the spectacle, Cohen ran gambling, loan sharking, and extortion rackets across Southern California. Multiple assassination attempts failed to kill him. reinforcing his reputation as untouchable. That myth collapsed not through bullets, but bureaucracy. In the early 1960s, federal prosecutors focused on financial crimes. Cohen was convicted of tax evasion and served time in federal prison, including at Alcatraz. Prison diminished his power, but not his desire for relevance. After his release, Cohen attempted to rebrand himself through memoirs and television appearances, portraying his past as misunderstood entrepreneurship. The city that once feared him had moved on. Organized crime no longer needed flamboyant symbols. Cohen died in 1976 at age 62, officially from stomach cancer. His end was quiet, almost anticlimactic, yet his impact lingered. He taught Hollywood how to glamorize real criminals and taught criminals how to perform for Hollywood. Mickey Cohen did not just live in the spotlight. He proved that sometimes the spotlight itself is the crime. Benjamin "Dopey" Benny Fine. Long before Hollywood glamour met organized crime, Benjamin "Dopey" Benny Fine had already laid the groundwork. Born in 1880, Fine operated during the early 20th century when Broadway, vaudeville, and silent film distribution were rapidly expanding. While later mobsters focused on casinos and narcotics, Fine understood a subtler truth. Control the workers and you control the show. Fine rose to power through labor racketeering. He infiltrated stagehand unions, theater crews, and distribution networks that entertainment producers depended on. When disputes arose, his men decided whether productions proceeded or collapsed. Strikes appeared overnight. Equipment vanished. Performances were canceled without explanation. Fear replaced negotiation. By the 1910s and 1920s, Fine's influence extended into early film distribution, particularly in New York. Studios seeking stable operations quietly paid for labor peace. This system normalized extortion within entertainment long before Hollywood became a global industry. Fine did not seek fame. His power worked best when unnamed. As organized crime modernized under figures like Lucky Luciano, Fine became obsolete. His methods were crude compared to emerging syndicates that favored structure over chaos. In the early 1930s, Fine was shot in an ambush and survived, but his authority never recovered. He died in 1975 at age 90, largely forgotten by the industry he helped corrupt. Fine's legacy is foundational rather than dramatic. He proved entertainment was vulnerable not because of excess, but because of dependency. Before there were mob-financed movies or casino headliners, there was Dopey Benny Fine, quietly demonstrating that art cannot exist without labor, and labor can be owned. Dutch Schultz. Dutch Schultz was never subtle, and subtlety was exactly what organized crime demanded. Born in 1902, Schultz rose during Prohibition by building a ruthless bootlegging empire across New York and New Jersey. His operations extended into nightclubs, theaters, and entertainment venues, particularly in Harlem, where musicians and performers worked under protection systems he controlled. Money flowed quickly, but discipline did not. Unlike other mob leaders who adapted to changing conditions, Schultz resisted authority, even from within his own world. As law enforcement pressure increased in the early 1930s, he became increasingly paranoid. His refusal to cooperate, compromise, or retreat placed him in direct conflict with both prosecutors and fellow crime bosses. When U.S. Attorney Thomas Dewey targeted him aggressively, Schultz made a fatal mistake. He announced his intent to have Dewey killed. That declaration sealed his fate. The national crime leadership concluded that Schultz had become too dangerous to protect. On October 23, 1935, while dining at the Palace Chop House in Newark, Schultz was shot multiple times by hired assassins. He lingered for hours, speaking incoherently before dying at age 33. Schultz's death was a corrective action, not a feud. It demonstrated that defiance of structure was unacceptable, regardless of profits. Hollywood later drew inspiration from his downfall, often portraying him as a tragic rebel. In reality, his story was simpler. Power without restraint invites elimination. Schultz believed his wealth made him indispensable. The silence after his death proved otherwise. Albert Anastasia. Albert Anastasia built his authority on efficiency. Born in 1902, he emerged as one of the most feared figures in American organized crime, earning the nickname Lord High Executioner. As a founding leader of Murder, Inc., Anastasia oversaw enforcement operations that ensured discipline across multiple crime families. His reputation rested on precision rather than spectacle. By the 1950s, Anastasia had risen to lead what would become the Gambino crime family. His leadership style was direct and unforgiving. Loyalty was demanded, not negotiated. Yet as the Mafia evolved toward shared governance, Anastasia resisted compromise. His unpredictability unsettled allies and attracted enemies who preferred stability over fear. On October 25, 1957, Anastasia entered the barbershop of the Park Sheraton Hotel in Manhattan for his usual shave. Moments later, gunmen entered and fired multiple shots. Disoriented, Anastasia reportedly lunged toward a mirror before collapsing. He died at age 55. The killing was swift, public, and symbolic. Anastasia's assassination ended an era dominated by brute enforcement. For Hollywood, the image of a powerful man killed mid-routine became an enduring motif, echoed in countless films. Yet the real lesson was organizational. The executioner was removed not because he failed, but because his methods no longer fit the system he helped build. In worlds governed by order, even fear must answer to structure. Charles Lucky Luciano. Charles Lucky Luciano did not merely participate in organized crime, he redesigned it. Born in 1897, Luciano rejected the chaotic street wars that defined early Mafia activity and replaced them with structure, hierarchy, and shared profit. His most lasting achievement was the creation of the Commission, a governing body that transformed criminal families into a coordinated national syndicate. This shift reduced internal bloodshed and maximized revenue, allowing crime to function like a corporation. Luciano understood image and influence. During the 1930s and 1940s, as Hollywood expanded rapidly, he recognized entertainment as both a cultural weapon and a financial opportunity. Through intermediaries, his organization extended influence into labor unions, film distribution, and nightclub circuits. These connections rarely appeared in public records, which was precisely the point. Luciano believed true power operated invisibly. Convicted in 1936 on prostitution-related charges, Luciano was sentenced to prison. During World War II, the U.S. government quietly enlisted his assistance to secure New York's docks from sabotage, acknowledging his continued influence even behind bars. In exchange, his sentence was commuted, and he was deported to Italy in 1946. Exile did not end his authority. From Naples, Luciano remained a respected figure, meeting associates and maintaining strategic oversight across continents. On January 26, 1962, he collapsed from a heart attack at Naples International Airport while preparing to meet a film producer interested in adapting his life story. Luciano was 64 years old. Luciano's legacy endures because nearly every cinematic depiction of organized crime traces back to his design. He did not seek the spotlight, yet Hollywood built its myths on the framework he created. Power, to Luciano, was never about fear alone. It was about permanence. Joseph Colombo. Joseph Colombo believed visibility could be protection. Born in 1923, he rose within the Colombo crime family at a time when law enforcement pressure was increasing and public opinion was shifting. Unlike predecessors who valued anonymity, Colombo pursued legitimacy through activism. In 1970, he founded the Italian-American Civil Rights League, claiming it aimed to combat ethnic stereotyping. The organization drew massive crowds and attracted politicians, celebrities, and media attention. Colombo used the platform to challenge portrayals of organized crime in film and television, most notably during the production of The Godfather. Studio executives quietly negotiated with representatives linked to Colombo, resulting in script changes that removed explicit references to the word Mafia. For a brief moment, Colombo succeeded in influencing Hollywood openly. That exposure proved fatal. Organized crime leadership viewed Colombo's public persona as reckless. Attention endangered operations built on silence. On June 28, 1971, during a League rally at Columbus Circle in New York, Colombo was shot at close range by an assailant who was immediately killed by bodyguards. Colombo survived, but suffered severe brain damage. He lived in a vegetative state for 7 years before dying in 1978 at age 54. His removal restored the old rule: invisibility equals survival. Colombo's story remains one of the clearest examples of how public power can undermine private authority. Hollywood would continue to tell mob stories, but never again under such open pressure from the men who inspired them. Vito Genovese. Vito Genovese was never interested in admiration. Where others chased influence through spectacle, he pursued dominance through control. Born in 1897 in Italy, Genovese rose within the American Mafia by mastering patience, intimidation, and long memory. He was a key lieutenant to Charles "Lucky" Luciano and absorbed the lesson that structure, not chaos, sustained power. When Luciano was deported, Genovese maneuvered carefully, eliminating rivals and consolidating authority until he became head of what is now known as the Genovese crime family. His reach extended into narcotics trafficking, labor racketeering, and business infiltration across the East Coast. Entertainment was not his passion, but unions were, and unions shaped film production, distribution, and theater operations. Control was indirect, which made it effective. In the late 1950s, federal pressure intensified. Genovese was convicted in 1959 on narcotics charges and sentenced to prison. For most men, incarceration meant irrelevance. For Genovese, it was an inconvenience. Through intermediaries, he continued issuing orders, settling disputes, and influencing decisions beyond prison walls. Law enforcement acknowledged that his authority did not collapse, it adapted. Genovese died in prison in 1969 at age 71, officially from a heart attack. Persistent rumors of poisoning exist, but no credible evidence supports them. What remains certain is that his organization outlived him, retaining his name as a testament to how deeply his methods shaped its identity. Genovese's story is not dramatic because it lacks spectacle. That is precisely why it matters. He demonstrated that true control does not require visibility, violence does not need publicity, and removal from society does not equal removal from power. Hollywood later borrowed this model endlessly, the quiet figure whose influence persists long after the door closes. Frank Nitti. Frank Nitti represented the final stage of loyalty. Born in 1886, he rose within the Chicago outfit as Al Capone's most trusted enforcer. Where Capone handled publicity and bravado, Nitti handled consequences. He specialized in turning decisions into outcomes, earning a reputation for calm efficiency rather than cruelty. After Capone's imprisonment, Nitti assumed operational control of the organization. He modernized its structure, expanding into labor unions and business fronts, including sectors connected to film distribution and theater operations. Stability, not notoriety, became the goal. Under Nitti, violence decreased while profits grew. That balance shattered in 1943 when a federal investigation threatened to expose the outfit's labor racketeering network. Nitti was subpoenaed to testify. Cooperation would have meant survival, but also betrayal. For men like Nitti, betrayal was worse than death. On March 19, 1943, Nitti walked alone to a Chicago railroad yard, and shot himself. He was 57 years old. The act was deliberate, controlled, and consistent with the code he lived by. He left no statement of explanation, only silence. Nitty's death closed a chapter that Hollywood rarely depicts accurately. The enforcer did not fall to rivals or law enforcement gunfire. He removed himself to protect an organization that would continue without him. His story reveals a grim truth. In systems built on secrecy, the ultimate act of loyalty is disappearance. Silence was not Nitty's weakness. It was his final command. Anthony Tony Accardo. Anthony Tony Accardo mastered what most men in organized crime never learned: restraint. Born in 1906, Accardo rose within the Chicago outfit during its most violent years, serving under Al Capone and observing firsthand how publicity destroyed empires. Where others chased dominance through fear or visibility, Accardo built authority through silence, patience, and selective force. By the 1940s, Accardo effectively controlled the Chicago outfit, though he rarely claimed the title publicly. His leadership style favored delegation and insulation. Decisions flowed through layers of trusted intermediaries, reducing exposure while preserving command. Under his guidance, the organization expanded into legitimate businesses, Las Vegas casinos, and labor unions that quietly influenced entertainment, construction, and distribution industries. Accardo avoided the mistakes that ended his predecessors. He did not grant interviews, pose for photographs, or cultivate myth. Law enforcement struggled to connect him directly to crimes, despite widespread acknowledgement of his power. FBI files described him as one of the most insulated crime figures in American history. Unlike nearly everyone around him, Accardo died peacefully. He passed away in 1992 at age 86, having never served significant prison time for violent offenses. His longevity was not luck, it was strategy. Accardo understood that survival depended on invisibility, and that legacy mattered less than continuity. Hollywood often glorifies dramatic rises and bloody falls. Accardo's story offers no such spectacle. Instead, it reveals a colder truth. The most successful figures are rarely remembered because they never needed to be seen. Accardo did not outlive his enemies by force. He outlasted them by refusing to become a story. George Bugs Moran. George Bugs Moran is remembered less for what he built than for what he lost. Born in 1893, Moran led Chicago's North Side Gang during Prohibition, standing in direct opposition to Al Capone's expanding empire. Where Capone blended charisma with calculation, Moran relied on stubborn loyalty and confrontation. Their rivalry defined an era of violence that captured public imagination. Moran's control over bootlegging routes and gambling operations made him Capone's most persistent obstacle. That resistance culminated on February 14, 1929, when 7 of Moran's men were lined up and executed in what became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Moran himself survived only because he arrived late. The massacre destroyed his organization and shifted public opinion decisively against organized crime. Afterward, Moran's influence collapsed rapidly. Without manpower or capital, he drifted into minor criminal schemes, stripped of relevance in a world moving toward corporate-style syndicates. While Capone became a symbol, immortalized by Hollywood, Moran faded into obscurity. He died in prison in 1957 at age 65, largely forgotten by the city he once fought to control. Moran's legacy survives primarily as contrast. He represented an older model of power, personal, confrontational, inflexible, that could not survive modernization. In cinematic terms, Moran should have been the tragic hero. In reality, history favored adaptation over defiance. His story reminds us that crime does not reward loyalty or courage. It rewards evolution. Those who fail to change are remembered only as footnotes in someone else's legend. The names you've heard tonight didn't disappear with the headlines. Their stories became blueprints, copied, polished, and sold back to us as entertainment. Hollywood says these are legends. History says they were warnings. The question is not whether power once controlled the spotlight, but whether it ever stopped. Was this era an exception or simply the first chapter? And if silence once meant survival, what does speaking mean today? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the truth was buried or transformed into myth? Like, share, and stay curious. This is Black Excellence Legends, and the story never ends.